This agarita is located in the butterfly garden at the Heard Museum in McKinney, Texas. You can see that these blue-green three-part leaves with the spiny edges cover the entire outside of the shrub. In some seasons it will have red berries, a favorite with the birds and other animals.
Here's the trifoliate foliage of an agarita. You may hear them called algeritas or agaritas. The most wonderful thing about these is that they have an intense fragrance to their flowers in the spring. They are one of the very first things to bloom, so bees will be all over them first thing in the spring, very, very early in the spring. And then those flowers are followed by tasty fruits, which humans and birds will enjoy. This one has a bit of a struggle going on. I think that it's been in the shade and has gotten too much water over the last 2 years, where we have had a very damp season here, and it has also had some issues with vines climbing over it. Normally this foliage would be much more dense, and these little blue-green trifoliate leaves would be all over the outside of this framework that you see here, these bare branches. Again, this one has been a beautiful shrub for many years and just seems to be having some challenges at the moment.
It's October now, but starting in mid-February, this bush is covered with really fragrant blossoms. And tiny little bees, gentle native bees, will visit this like crazy in the early spring. This blue orchard bee appreciates the nectar and pollen early in the season, but humans and other animals appreciate the berries later.
And one of the most striking plants in the garden right now, in late September, is this beautiful black dahlia shrub. You can see it's growing next to a Blackfoot daisy, a plant that really appreciates great drainage, and I suspect this entire bed needs very little water and does well in this full sun location. This is bright full sun. You see another black dahlia right back here, sort of a low mounded shrub. It's beautiful and covered with these tiny purple and white flowers at this time of year.
Honeybees and other bees like the flowers. This is in the pea family again, and a big favorite with all sorts of bees, but they're quite busy. They're not interested in the humans nearby. Black dahlia has a long bloom season. It's a great plant for a sunny, dry location. Texas Sotol and Wheeler Sotol are two elegant plants that really make a statement in a xeric or low water garden situation.
This extremely large and elegant display of Wheeler Sotol is at the Heard Museum in McKinney. You may be able to tell that the foliage is blue-gray. The Texas Sotol has the green foliage. The Wheeler Sotol has the blue-gray foliage. And as I get closer, you may be able to tell too that the foliage is extremely toothy. Those sharp serrations on the leaves are a consideration no matter where you put this plant. You're going to have to think about whether those are a benefit or a detriment. They can be great if you're looking for a plant to go under a window that provides a little protection from possible intruders. They can be bad if they hang over a pathway where you're going to be scraped by those teeth. The very, very large flower spike on these can be up to 15 feet tall. And in the season when it's blooming, earlier in the year, that is going to be absolutely covered with bees. Honeybees adore it, so do native bees, mostly the honeybees that I see on that flower spike. But it is a giant column, 15 feet tall, of tiny white flowers all clustered thickly up and down that stalk. Really neat plant. I think it should be used more often.
Amazingly, those big flower stalks are light and strong and make wonderful walking sticks. Here's what it looks like earlier in the year when those flowers were open before they dried out. They are white, and you can see all the pollinators visiting this plant while the flowers are blooming. Remember, these are 12 to 15 feet tall.
Here we have a wax myrtle tucked into this landscape. This is a shrub that's found a little bit more commonly towards the east of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, but it seems to get along just fine here. You might be able to see those tiny berries along the stems. Those are the berries from which you can actually harvest wax, giving it its name, wax myrtle. If you plant one for your landscape, things you need to know are that it comes in a couple of different forms. There is the Don's Dwarf, which is a shorter version of the wax myrtle. This one looks like it might be Don's Dwarf. And then there is a much larger shrub that's very, very similar, but larger. Let's see if I can get this to focus on those berries so you can see they're all up and down along the stems. Kind of an odd placement for berries right up against the stem. And those will turn a bluish color as they ripen. Here is a set of wax myrtles looking very different than the others we saw because these are much bigger. This is the full-size wax myrtle mixed in with these other shrubs and trees and forbs in this landscape. I can smell the mist flower from here. That's really sweetly scented. But I'm going to walk up on these wax myrtles so that you can see the berries forming on this one. This one does have some berries, and we want to get a look at those and see if we can film that. Actually, I don't see the berries now that I'm close. This is not really doing what I thought it was doing. Those are just little knobs on the stems that I was seeing. But this is the full-size wax myrtle as compared to that Don's Dwarf that I saw in the other section. This one is much bigger. I have to tip that camera way up to get the top of it. So this one is probably 10 to 12 feet tall where it is here. And this is still at the AgriLife Extension Research Center, but not in the Eco Park. It's over by the Waterwise House. Nolinas. Nolina texana and Nolina lindheimeri have a very similar growth habit. This sort of fountain of stringy green leaves that comes up and spreads out. It makes a larger cluster slowly that is very well behaved in a landscape.
The Lindheimers is more blue-green, the Texana is more green. Botany enthusiasts sometimes have heated discussions over the differences between aromatic sumac and a skunkbush sumac. But for most of us, there's not really much different. Both are interestingly scented when you crush the leaves. And by interestingly, I mean sort of a spicy smell. I really don't get the skunk bush name. It doesn't seem to do this plant justice. It flowers very early in the spring, followed by these intense red berries, which are loved by birds. Though it works in full sun or shade, in full sun this will make a nicely rounded shrub that maintains a beautiful shape in the landscape. Here's a different aromatic sumac, and I know at least some of you are thinking that looks like poison ivy or poison oak, but it's not. It is still an aromatic sumac grown in a shadier situation. Hop tree or wafer ash is a tree I see more often in gardens than in the wild, but it does grow wild in North Texas, most often at the edge of a woods in a floodplain, in a semi-shady area. These are the fruits of the wafer ash. Those are the dried fruits of the wafer ash, a sort of a flake that's light enough to blow on the wind. This plant is loved by butterfly enthusiasts because it is a host for the giant swallowtail and tiger swallowtail butterflies.